Is our planet at the top levels being controlled by off-world factions? Ladies and gentlemen, Rex Bear Leak Project, how the heck are you? This is a live-action role-playing game for entertainment purposes only, of course. We're going to discuss the possibility of there being an extraterrestrial faction that has taken over the controls of the planet. When I say that, I'm talking about at the top levels. If we look at things via pyramid scheme, they're in the apex. Just 2 days ago, I watched a movie that still gives me the chills when I think about it. Goosebumps, gets the hair standing up on the back of my neck, and places I didn't even know I had hair. Hello. And it's called Captive State. Came out in 2019, and I watched it. I can't remember if I watched it on Netflix or Amazon. I was actually skeptical to watch it at first because pretty much most alien movies these days, in my opinion, kind of suck. And this one, when I read the description, I was like, I'm not really interested. But I finally decided to watch it because there was just nothing else on. And I am so glad that I did, because when I look at the similarities in the movie and what's going on today and what I have predicted and talked about and blogged about, and I mean, even I was writing about this stuff 12 years ago. I was talking about it over 20 years ago. It seems like it's taken events and put them into movie format that are going on currently and might happen in the very near future. So in this film called Captive State, it's got John Goodman as one of the main actors, and he was phenomenal. I was so impressed, especially after watching the movie in full. I will give some I'm going to tell some parts of the movie, but I'm not going to give everything away. So I will say there are some spoiler alerts here. If you don't want to know about the movie at all, you just want to watch it first, watch it, and then come back and listen to this podcast, or vice versa. But it is still giving me the chills. Well, Gregg Allison is going to be our guest today, and he is a contractor at NASA. He makes it very clear that he's a contractor at NASA. He's also a rocket builder. Literally, he built a rocket in his backyard, in his garage, back, was it in the late 1990s, that is actually in the Guinness Book of World Records for going so high into the atmosphere. And he's very intelligent, and he's also very down to earth at the same time. We're going to discuss what would happen if an off-world faction took over the world. And we're also going to talk about, what if they already did? Then what? What do we do, and where do we go from here or from there? Real quick, I do want to thank my friends over at solarwaterheater.com. Have you ordered yours yet? If not, what are you waiting for? Get yours. There's a code you can use called LEAK15 that will get you an additional 15% off. Plus, it's discounted right now, I think 50% off as well. So if you use the code, you'll get an additional 15% off. This thing weighs about 2.6 pounds. And what's so neat about it is it will actually heat water. You can heat water in as little as 30 minutes without any sunlight. I mean, all you need is the sunlight. You do need sunlight, but you don't need any electricity. You don't need any kerosene or any type of fuels that a lot of stoves require. You just put this out like this, and you get some good sunlight with it. And as little as 30 minutes, your water is hot, as well as it's good for rice. It's good for noodles. It's good for sanitizing water. It's good for coffee. It's good for tea. And on that note, I'm going to drink some coffee right now. Halo. I'm going to ask Gregg about Halo. He was a part of a program called Halo, which is high altitude launch orbit or something along those lines. Let's get him in here right now. Gregg Allison. He's also got a YouTube channel. You should subscribe. Green Gregs on YouTube, and his other YouTube channel. I'll leave the links for both of them in the video description box. I just can't remember the name of the second one off the top of my head here. So let's bring him in right now. Ladies and gentlemen, would you just look at it? Gregg Allison, the legend, the man, the way of life, might be Anunnaki, might be Odin reincarnated. Well, this is very interesting because I watched a movie 2 nights ago called Captive State. And this recently, I mean, it just came out, and the film stars John Goodman, Ashton Sanders, Jonathan Majors, Colson Baker, and Vera Farmiga. But my favorite was John. And he was, when you watch the movie, by the end of the movie, if it doesn't really impact you, I'm going to be like, okay, check your pulse, because I am still getting goosebumps, and parts of my body that I didn't even know I had hair are standing up. I mean, I woke up the next morning just emotional. I literally almost had tears, man. It was that powerful. And it's a film about this extraterrestrial race that takes over quick. I mean, first they get the nations to secede. They say, okay, we're going to take control, and they have a blackout. So they shut off the power. People join like right away. And they're like, okay, we want to be a part of this, turn the power back on. And so these ETs turn the power back on. But what's fascinating is they call them cockroaches. And there's these extraterrestrials that are very physiologically superior in many aspects, because as far as a battle-driven being, because they can like simultaneously turn all these spikes on around their body, like, and all these spikes are there, right? They can run faster, and their weapons are more advanced. So the world gives up, and then there's this intermediary system where you've got like this global government, and they work with these extraterrestrials. But they're also now bringing and rounding anybody up, the resistance, and everybody now is tracked. They've got this tracking system that tracks everybody. And there's this one scene where the bigwig that talks from the government of people to this new ET faction, he has to go through all these different cleaning processes to get to these ETs. And he made a comment that really verified some of the thoughts that I have been thinking about the facial coverings. When I see it, I look at it almost like, this is one of the things that came to mind. Now, remember, I'm crazy, so this is just a very crazy thought, of course. But I thought to myself, this makes me wonder what if they're among us, like the movie They Live, and they don't want to smell us. They don't want to smell our breath. So they're like, put on your facial coverings. We don't want to smell you. And there's this one scene where what I was telling you about, where the bigwig from the human government, the NWO system, was going to meet with these ETs. And he was talking to John Goodman, and he said to John, as he's going through all this sterilization process and putting on all this gear, getting ready to go meet them, he goes, they don't like the way they don't like the way we smell. Would you believe it? And that's what he said. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, that reminds me of what's going on now. And with the tracking, there's nowhere to hide. I mean, if they can track you, if you've got some type of tracking system embedded in you and they want to get you, they know where you are. And so they could even listen to what you were saying, and they could, based upon this implant that's implanted in the neck, and it's like a combination of technology and biology that's implanted right into the neck. And so there was a point there where they were able to take these things out, and then they would have a certain amount of time to put it into somebody else to trick the computer into thinking that was somebody else to get into certain security and such. But so much of what I was looking at in that film, when you watch it, you'll say, wait a second, have we already been invaded? And I've questioned this. Are they coming back? That's what I think. I think they're coming back. I don't think they took a trip, they're coming back to check on their supplies, to check on what they have essentially feel like they own. They think that we're their property. Your turn. 10 minutes later.
Rex, they may not like my mask. I have invented the cigar smoking mask.
That should be more popular. At least you can, enjoy something.
Exactly. And, Rex, the key thing here is that this is all very weird. What you bring up here, it also reminds me of the movie Childhood's End. And maybe it's a case that in order to not evoke too much karma on them, I think anything living inside this universe, be it us or aliens or whatever, is subject to the same rules at some level, the same karma. And they have, if they want to do something, and I would say the same thing for people that we might think as overlords on this world, do something incredibly bad to most of the people, they have to find some way to mitigate that karma. And getting us to buy into it at some level is one way they do that. As you may remember from the Sumerian cuneiform text, when Enlil destroyed the world with a flood, he was worried about what the greater creator would think. And that's the only reference to the greater creator that I'm aware of from any of those texts. I've never heard any other mention of a greater creator beyond Anu and Enlil and Enki and those from the Sumerians. Now, so that makes you wonder what's really afoot. We live in a very strange time, Rex, when the Pentagon is now showing us pictures of these little tic-tac things and other stuff, and they're hinting at some kind of disclosure, and they're just starting to open the gate and let things trickle in this crazy upside-down world that we find in the year 2020. Maybe the time's running out and things are going to start happening like crazy. But what is this stuff? Why is this stuff? What's real? What's not? We have so many people seeing so much stuff, Rex, for so long that it's getting to the point it's kind of hard to deny that something's going on. What is it? Are the Tic Tacs actually government vehicles? Are they vehicles from other governments, as Ted Cruz would think? You know, that seems kind of incredible to think that some other governments would have this kind of technology if we don't, as he tries to allude. Now, some of us do think that we have some of this technology. How good is it? Where does it come from? And does someone have better technologies? There's someone else that is overlording the powers that be. Why are the powers that be so motivated to take the steps they're taking, which seem to be so against humanity? So I think there's some big questions. I've always said one of the biggest questions in the universe is the big enigma to me. It's not why are we here? Why is there a universe? It's like, why are we as spiritual beings living in a physical universe? I think that's the biggest one. I think the second biggest one would be, why would creatures come from way off and just try to take over our world? Or why would they be here in great number and hide, play hide and go seek, and try to make it totally incredible, make everybody laugh, at the whole scenario? I mean, it is really weird. But there are so many reports, so many things happen to so many people, from the stories of abductions to all the things that have been photographed, mass sightings where literally thousands of people are standing in the streets of like Mexico City and other places looking up at thousands of orbs in the sky at one time. Photographs from the FLIR, the gun sight cameras of, the Belgians had this stuff from way back. The Brazilians had these videos from way back from their aircraft. There was a dogfight that Iranian forces had back when Iran was under the Shah of Iran with an unidentified craft. What were these craft? What were they fighting? Were they just shooting in the air? They didn't fare too well. Whatever, if these were just air. No, what is it that gets picked up on a radar? What happens when something's on a radar and people see it too? This is all just some really sophisticated, highly coordinated, highly orchestrated swamp gas, right? So it's highly amazing how all these things can just be laughed off. And it's like, if this stuff is happening, Rex, it's the biggest news on planet Earth, and yet we ignore it. We laugh at it. We sweep it under the rug. What the heck, Rex? I mean, that's, like I said, biggest enigma to me is, why are spiritual beings living in a physical universe? The second biggest enigma has to be, how can there be something like this going on and it's totally laughed at, swept under the rug, and ridiculed? And now they're kind of cracking open the door just a wee little bit through the Pentagon, which seemed to be shed just a sliver of possible credibility. Although a lot of people say, oh, it's just Air Force drones or Navy drones. Maybe those are. But there's just the level of weirdness here is off the charts. But I think to make the story credible, you have to start with, there's a big question. Well, how could it get here? This guy's like James Oberg, who would shoot this. He's also an aerospace engineer and a writer of great intellect, and I've respected him, and I was reading about him, reading stuff from him in my younger days, and he's actually a Facebook friend of mine. He he was shooting down the whole idea of, when I was, reading stuff when I was a teenager, saying, why would a civilization spend a great amount of energy to come here from another place in the universe, another star system, even if the nearest star to travel here takes so long and just incredible amounts of energy to get here, why would they do all that to play hide and go seek? Oh, that's a good question, actually. And he used that to shoot the whole thing down. But no, that's still a good question, even if you believe it. But there is some interesting answers to that. One is, how would they actually get here, which we might be able to take to see. He was looking at from the standpoint of traditional physics. There's also the why would they come here, and I think we can shoot down a lot of that. But if you look at it from the standpoint of traditional physics, there's a big speed limit in the universe, and it is the speed of light. It's this. If this chart had speed coming this way, there's a matter side of the universe, and it's thought that there may be a side of the universe called tachyons. And as you travel toward the speed of light in matter, your energy that you contain within, as you try to speed up, you're putting more and more energy into matter. The problem is you get to some almost infinite amount of energy as you get close to the speed of light. Infinite mass and infinite energy. Your mass and your energy both go up incredibly. And so you can asymptotically, which means you can get closer and closer and closer. But theoretically, and Einstein says, we can never cross this barrier. On the other side, they postulate there's another kind of particle that actually travels faster than the speed of light. As it can't slow down to the speed of light as it encounters the same problem, like a mirror universe. Well, we know in our universe, as objects go faster and faster, time slows down on the objects. At the speed of light, time would actually be zero. So if you could take a spaceship and put the speed of light, it would be frozen forever because its clocks would stop. It'd have nothing to tell it to stop. You don't want to just travel at the speed of light unless there's some external force to stop you because you're stuck. And over here, though, time runs backwards. And over here, the speed would be so infinite that the cool thing about this side is it would map out every possible pattern instantly that ever could be as time runs backwards. So, there's that old adage, that old joke is that how long would it take for an infinite number of rednecks and an infinite number of shotguns with an infinite amount of beer and an infinite amount of stop signs to shoot the works of Shakespeare into the stop signs? Actually, that's funny as it is, that theoretically is possible through, random patterns, over some, if you have infinite supply of all those things. Well, what that says is you would have an infinite mind somewhere over here, because it would have every pattern possible traced out in a very short order of time. So you could say there would be God over this way, or something we might refer to as God, with time running backwards to our time. But according to the physics as we understand them, you can't cross this barrier. But I've kind of wrote down something here. I've actually named this barrier, and I've called it the inertia wall. If you could take yourself out of the inertia frame of our universe, you wouldn't be limited by such things. And that, inertia is a strange thing. It says that once you impart a certain amount of energy into something, it's going to travel forever in the same direction and speed until you impart some other energy or force upon it to change it. And it's really weird stuff. It's related to momentum, but it's really a weird physics. I'm gonna drop a bombshell that a lot of people aren't aware of, and it may be too much to say, but I'm not going to explain it. I'm just going to say this: inertia is actually a field, and some of us have some understanding of that and how to interact with it. Once you understand inertia, you can do wild, crazy stuff. That's all I'm going to say about that. I'm not going to talk about that any further. Now, having said that, let's go back to conventional physics. I talked about this previously on the channel. I found it interesting that if you take a circuit with a battery, resistor, an inductor, and a capacitor, that's an RLC circuit. It's got resistance, it's got inductance, and it's got capacitance. And capacitance is how much electrical charge can it store. Resistance is trying to keep it from going through, and the inductance is trying to resist the rate of change in it, and that's sets up magnetic field. You can find the fundamental frequency of this circuit, and you can build that in what we call a Colpitts oscillator in electrical engineering terms. I've actually built those. But the fundamental frequency of the RLC circuit is equal to R, the resistance over the square root of the inductance times the capacitance. And so, okay, that's kind of easy to do. But what's really odd is in free space, you get these terms called the permittivity and permeability of free space. Permittivity is like the electric field in free space. In fact, it's permittivity is defined as a polarity in a material as the electric polarization of the dielectric. There came talk. It's the stuff you know, like the ceramic and a capacitor dielectric. It's you know, even a ceramic capacitor has an electric dielectric property to it, and what it is the atoms in it get polarized, and if you get them aligned a certain way, and the more work you do to align those, it's doing work on the system. I'm not going to go all into that, but it has to do with that. It's an electric property, just like the capacitance in free space. The other term, the permittivity, is the resistance of free space, again, to change in the electrical field, and it's a magnetic component. So it's the same terms. It's exactly the same equation, just using different terms. Same form, same components, it's just different terms. Permittivity and permeability versus capacitance and inductance. So free space, the speed of light in free space is equal to 1 over, or some constant over, the square root of epsilon naught times mu naught, which is a strange thing to consider, that a translational speed has the same terms in it, the speed limit of the universe, as the resonant frequency of a RLC circuit. What that says really is the speed of light is in a resonant point in the material universe that we live in. So if you can change your resonance, you might be able to bore a hole through this inertial wall. You could travel into another time, basically, and go faster than light, but you would be running backwards in time at the same time until you punch back through to the other side. So if you had the technology to do that, you might be able to transit free space in very little time with very little energy, and it might just be a question of having an inertial field generator. Now, I'm not going to explain that because I do have agreements with various people to not do that. But what I will do is talk about a more conventional idea here that people have seen, this idea of a rotating copper disc. So I'm showing a copper disc here, and it's rotating. Well, I had seen and read about, you know, some of the earlier guys that did work with rotating copper discs, and how supposedly when they built one of these in their job, you know, it's basically a homopolar generator. Somebody claimed they had one, and they spun it up so fast that it took off and flew through the ceiling of the garage, and it actually flew. Well, for it to fly, it have to have some kind of a symmetry in the fields of it. There is some, I'm not sure that in itself is sufficient. So what you get is, I didn't think it was possible. If you had like a copper disc or a metal plating, some metal disc with copper plate on it, I thought it would fall. It would absolutely, you couldn't have a structure that could retain the RPMs it would require to speed up to such a point that the electrons would actually centrifugally move outward to the outside of the disk, making the outside of the disk negative and the center of the disk positive. I didn't think it was possible, but I actually ran through the mathematics when I was in college, and it was either 33,000 RPM or 333,000 RPM, something like it. It was a 33 number, believe it or not, and it was a high number, but it was still within the material. It must have been 333,000. It's got to be, you know, because a lot of things do spin at 33,000 RPM. I don't remember now. It's been, you know, that's been 30 years ago. But, you know, it took me like over a day to derive the equations and work through all the math. But I did it. And you had to understand the valence level of the material, the electrons in the metal, and all these kind of things to work this kind of equation out. And a computer centrifugal force, and I had to find a centrifugal force to exceed the Coulomb force, where the positive and negative charges would want to be pulled to each other. Coulomb force is one of the strongest forces in the universe, but it's actually doable. So if you had a disk which was negative on the outside, that's your electric charge. And if it's spinning, one thing that's going to happen is electrons, or even without spin, they're going to try to flash over through the air, at least in the air. And they'll do it in vacuum too, but not as easily. They'll flash over. As they flash over toward the center back to the positive, you're going to get electrons moving, and you're going to have magnetic fields wrapping around that. As any motion, any charge moving charge creates a magnetic field. And it's what right-hand rule. So if my thumb is the electricity, my fingers are the direction of the magnetic field. Now, that's too symmetrical from an electrical standpoint. So if you wanted to have something happen electrically, you need an asymmetry if you want to get any kind of propulsion out of that alone. Now, it could be that if you put some Van de Graaff generator sphere here, you know, charge likes to accumulate on the outside of a surface, and the sphere is one of the best ways to accumulate it. And 3 points determine a plane. So if you really wanted to get them down here and the right kind of geometry, you'd want like 3 big Van de Graaff generator spheres. You ever see the bottom of a UFO? What do you usually see? 3 big spheres. Interesting. Now you might want to have some kind of conductor that you could vary the amount of charge that comes off this center tap to each of these spheres. If you do that, you might create a steerable electric field. So that just having it dispersed creates some asymmetry. Now how good that would be, it takes some experimentation to find out. I'm not, you know, I can't tell you that right off the bat. But you do have another asymmetry as this thing spins around, because you have an electric current basically moving around and around. The magnetic lines will wrap around in one direction all the way around this thing. So that will be symmetrical, and it will but you'd have to have a real strong magnetic field to do anything, because Earth's magnetic field is so weak. Getting propulsion from magnetic field alone is kind of not very good. The electric field might do more for you, but because, you know, there is the electromotive generators, motors, General Motors rules for how you get motion from electric fields and things like that. So we won't go into all that today, but suffice it to say that, you know, even if you just take a homopolar generator and do a lot of mods to it, you could do some very interesting experiments. I'm more interested in doing more solid state type experiments, playing around with inertia fields, which basically are frequency type stuff. If I kind of say, if you take derivatives, Rex, oh, yeah, let's look at something else here. I got some other equations on here. Taking limits in physics. If you take, you know, F equals ma, or A equals the acceleration, F divided by m. So in physics, there's something called taking a limit, which is kind of like a derivative, where you look at varying one of these going towards 0, one of these values. What happens if you take the limit of force as mass goes to 0? Well, in this equation, what you find is that very little force gives you a lot of acceleration, basically. But it's more interesting if you look at taking the limit of acceleration. Acceleration is F divided by m. As m goes to 0, what you would find then is that you could get almost infinite acceleration as the mass goes to 0. How do you take the mass to 0? You take it out of our inertia space. You know, what we're talking about is mass as seen by the universe you're in. And that goes back to epsilon naught, mu naught, and how you relate to the inertia field in the universe itself. So if you can, big if, and guys are going to be shooting all kind of stuff at this, and this is what you call a live action role play. Big if, but if you could phase out of the inertia space that you're in, your potential to accelerate to near infinity becomes real easy. Maybe you can turn on a flashlight and go, boing, off you go. It wouldn't take much, or some asymmetry in your electromagnetic field. There's been work done with asymmetrical capacitors and producing acceleration, but that's generally and some people call it the Biffle-Brown effect. I would submit that is mostly an effect of ion wind propulsion that you see with that, which is accelerating air over the electrical charge differential of the plates. But there are those that think you are actually creating a kind of a bubble in inertia space with that system. And what happens when you modulate that in the right way? A lot of people, if you put enough tension on free space, tension tensors is what makes things move, makes things happen. But in our literature, at least, that's commonly available, there's not a lot of work done on looking at that from an AC phenomenology and varying the frequencies. Now there's something for someone to play with. So I just threw some ideas out there for somebody to play with. So the question is it technically possible for another civilization to come here in short order without expending great amounts of energy? All I'm going to say is this. It may be indeed possible. That's not a definitive answer, but what it does is opens the door to shoot down this notion that you got to spend so much energy and so much time to travel here. But maybe even if you had to spend so much time and energy to get here, it might be worth it because there's still the why. Why would they want to come here? Go ahead.
Well, let me jump in on that real quick. And before we get to the next level, because that's going to be the next part of this discussion, is I want to talk about the ring makers of Saturn from Norman Berggren. Now, this is a fascinating read. It's almost kind of made cult status, right? Because people are spending $1,000 for a copy of this thing now, and they were spending even more just last year. So I think the prices have gone down on this a little bit. But this gentleman actually worked at NASA for many years. I think he was with NASA for 20-something years. And he brings up the theory of there being these gigantic ships that are actually manipulating the rings of Saturn. And he even shows some images, and I'll show you one, and I want to get your take on this here. I'm not convinced. However, I do find it fascinating, and I always love to look for the underlying themes of conspiracy, or if it's just the truth. I want to get to the truth, and it seems like we've been lied to so many times about so many different things that it's interesting to look into alternatives. But this is one image as an example where I think it's showing what he believes is this giant craft that was manipulating the rings of Saturn. So I wonder, and I've talked to people like Daryl Sims as well, which is an incredible researcher into these implants. And he's been a part of surgeries where people have had these implants pulled out of their body that don't look like they're from humans. I mean, very bizarre stuff. There was this one time they even pulled this, and this was 28 years ago, approximately, I think in the early 90s, he said, where they pulled out this camera in somebody's eye, like this miniature looking camera attached to some type of like biological entity. He's like, like crawling away and stuff. And so with all that being said, we talked about, Greg's like, calm down, Rex, calm down. He's talked about the also this craft, this huge craft that he's got an image of, and he thinks that a lot of these ETs that abduct people are coming from this craft, and he thinks that it could be around Saturn. Iapetus, so bizarre, it does not look natural to me. It looks like an artificial moon of some type or a space station, almost identical to the Death Star in Star Wars. And with that being said, could these beings be from Saturn? Could that be their domain? So they wouldn't even have to travel from a different solar system. They wouldn't even have to travel from a different universe, or a different part of the universe. Now, let's add to this, though. Here's something that I find very interesting, and I want to get your take on this, and then we'll get to that part. I know I'm total ADHD here, but you can keep up with me. If anybody can, you can, and then some. So these grays, oftentimes when they pick people up, I've been told that on the craft, they'll ask questions like, why do you cross the street? Why do you do the dishes? Why do you have emotions when you watch something on TV and get upset about it? Just questions that you and I would be like, well, duh. I mean, that's what it's like being a human, right? And they're so advanced with some things, but yet when it comes to common sense stuff, they have no idea. Now, if that is the situation, those beings that are abducting people, I would think, did not root us, did not, they're coming here from somewhere way far away because they don't know what it's like to be human. They have no idea. So how would we be made in the image of them? And how would they have any manipulation or genetics on us unless they just did some tinkering, which I think they're kind of making their own hybrid program, and they could walk among us. I wouldn't be surprised if there are so many people that are walking among us right now that are not human. And then you have to ask the question, how many of us are even human anymore? When you look at all the DNA genetic manipulation that's taken place, when the inoculations and you look at the different DNA in those that are clearly, I mean, you read the labels, they're in there. So canine DNA, insect DNA, different cultures from aborted fetuses. So I just question, like, how much of this is still going on? Are we human? Are we the aliens?
I think humanity is a part of the question of why are they coming here? What is humanity? And I think that is why they're coming. So you brought up about a zillion topics here all at once. So yeah, on the Saturn, there are indeed photographs that astronomers explain away as being shepherded moons, moons that are in the orbit of Saturn, and by the arrangement of their orbits, they just happen to shepherd the ice particles that make up the rings. And they worked out some good explanations for that, apparently, that satisfies some good number of them. But, it still leaves a lot to be answered. What are they? Why are they there? And it is kind of unusual. Now, it may be that it is just moons and just happen to be in the right orders, or little bitty moons or moonlets that are doing that. But it's highly interesting there'd be so many of them to shepherd so many rings in such a way. So what is happening? Hypatia. If you've ever read the book 2001: A Space Odyssey that was written by Sir Arthur Clarke, he actually chose Hypatia as the target of the mission of the Discovery craft that went out when it had Hal on it and the astronauts. So, but Kubrick really couldn't do the complete. He wanted everything to look just spot on realistic. He could not duplicate Saturn with its rings. And the reason that Clarke chose Saturn was Hypatia was so weird, because Hypatia has, in addition to having like this strange equatorial ridge, which looks like two clamshells slammed together, and looking like a Death Star, it's got a light side and a dark side, a really bright side and a really dark side. There you go, which is very uncanny, and it makes it look like a beacon from Earth, like turning on and off, on and off, and on. And when the first went by the moon, the first Voyager that went by, or Pioneer actually, they called it. Yeah, you can see the. Yeah, that's got kind of a ridge, not a ridge, but the opposite of a ridge. That's got like a canyon down the center. Hypatia has got a ridge, which is kind of like a negative of that, right?
I'm biting my tongue, but I got to jump in, Greg. I'm so excited. Check this out. This is one thing that when I saw Iapetus and the Death Star connected together, it just blew my mind. So looking at Iapetus right now directly from NASA.gov, you can see this ridge. Now, this ridge is estimated to be 10 miles high, 10 miles wide, and it goes around the circumference of the moon. Here's something else I want to show you. If you look at this spot up here, this is actually a giant hexagon. It's not a circular crater. And you can see close-ups of Iapetus and other images that show these layers of what looks like giant hexagons, like these massive panels that were put together. It could be from electrical discharge as well, from these major plasma events and such. And it could have been manufactured in space with less gravity, where they were able to use this tetrahedron truss type technology and build with these gigantic panels. But one of the things that I find fascinating, not only is the ridge 10 miles high, 10 miles wide, the location of this huge hexagon up here. And then if we look at the Death Star, it's the same location. It's got the same similar ridge area, but here's what takes it to the next level. If you look down and to the right, this area right here, let me zoom in on it a little bit more even. Oh, this is much as let me zoom in. This looks like something major happened, something massive, explosion, cataclysm of serious proportions. Can you see that, what I'm talking about, this area?
Oh, yeah, and it happened after the ridge was formed because it disrupts the ridge. But the ridge is almost perfect. That's the odd thing, just like that canyon.
Yeah. Now look at the Death Star. It's got the same spots. If you look at the way that they're rebuilding it, you can see damage down here and up here. It's almost as if they had these telescopes and they said, hey, let's make one of those. Or they knew something and they added it in the movie, or it was somehow the DNA has this knowledge that we tap into the ether and the universe, and it just is kind of like a galactic download. I personally believe that, my belief is Iapetus absolutely is evidence of a highly advanced civilization, and they built that almost as like a lookout. And some of the moons of Saturn, I believe, could harbor very intelligent life. And Saturn in and of itself, the Thunderbolts project, the electric universe theory, that Saturn was a star at one point. And I hypothesize the rings could be a way to harness the energy of a star similar to a Dyson sphere. But instead of having, the typical Dyson sphere, you would have these rings that somehow harness the energy. And maybe there's like this Birkeland current area with this electricity. I'm just thinking of it in layman's terms, but how would you harness the energy of a star? Could you do it with rings?
You could get electromagnetic energy if you had a conductive ring, but these rings are rings of particles, so I don't know how with the rings of particles you would do that. But if you had a conductive ring, you can do it. In fact, you could put superconductors in a ring and use them to be propelled by the solar wind, basically, the electric component of the solar wind. And so you could sell on the electric outflux of our sun. So that's one way you can get some energy from our sun for propulsion. You could also sell on the pressure of the light with reflective, what we call light cells or solar cells, not photovoltaic type. So there's interesting technologies, but the whole idea of a Dyson sphere is it completely surrounds the star, and it captures the solar energy to be used directly by whatever civilization is there. And so that would be a type 2 civilization. It's highly interesting that we don't see true definitive evidence of that, although there are certainly things that are suggestive out there in space. But the problem is that most of them can still be explained away by other physics. So you would expect, and there's another, that's kind of related to the Fermi paradox of why aren't they here yet? Of course, we may be saying they actually are. But there's a paradox of why don't we see Dyson sphere type structures? If stars explode every 12,000 years, though, that might answer that. But so there's a lot of possibilities here. And maybe you do need to build a moon and hide inside of it, and that might be the best way to withstand an onslaught from a sun that might have temper tantrums every 12,000 years. Maybe. So go ahead.
Craig, you're cracking me up, man. So, because I'm in the background and I'm like, hey, I'm doing all these weird, he's like, what? So you're keeping your cool, man. I love it. You take a light bulb and it's getting an electrical charge, turn on, right? You just take a little bit of electricity, you got 10 watts, and you can light up an entire dark room from this little tiny light bulb.
Oh, yeah.
So if we look at the sun and this is where you and I think kind of disagree, and I love that. It's great to have discord, and it's great to have conversations, because iron sharpens iron. And my goodness, if we all thought the same way, we would be stuck. I mean, there wouldn't be that much innovation. And maybe that's, you ask about the physical experience, right? Like, why are we in this physical experience? One of my possible theories is maybe we got bored. We're like, you don't think so?
Yeah, no, actually, I've said that in one of the previous videos with you. I've talked about that.
Yeah, right. So, but yeah, right. We know everything. We are everything. So let's see what it's like to devolve.
You remember when I talked with the funnel a long time ago?
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. There's been several podcasts. The entire
universe as an artifact. I can grab a cup and do the same thing.
Yeah.
From time zero to the expanding out, and there's many enigmas here. If the universe starts at Big Bang and expands, I say yes, and I don't really care one way or another. The universe is huge. So if you have if this is time going forward, and you take various time slices, like slicing up a loaf of bread of the universe, and if on one side you're sitting there on a park bench, on the other side there's some kid sitting on a bicycle on a planet, neglecting the spinnings of planets and all these other things, and let's say that kid suddenly rides toward you. The relativistic terms, and any motion's got relativistic terms, but at our slow speeds, in our closed space, we can't observe it. It's too small. But over the vast distance of the universe, it would add up. Now, if you go near the speed of light, you see it and feel it, right? But across the vast distance of the universe, that kid's time frame shifts into the future. His now is like 300 years, 300 or 400 years in your future. When he stops, it's back where you're at. When he turns around and rides in the other direction, it shifts likewise into the past, 300 or 400 years. Depending on how fast he's going. If he's got a motorcycle, he might shift a few thousand years. He might be back at the Ice Age. So, or if was he slide a jet plane? So the whole thing is that time is an interesting thing. I just showed you that you could run backwards in time. That time is part of this inertia frame that we're in, just like matter. But the crazy thing is, what that says is that everything that's ever existed or ever will exist has to exist simultaneously right now. But if time were just one timeline, then you've got no free will. And I don't believe that. I do believe the multiverse concept, because I believe we have a free will, which says that every instant of time splits in just a multitude of directions. And quantum physics seems to allow for that. And that not being, that's the natural state of the universe at the quantum level. Now, we can't see that at our level, but that enables you to have free will. So if you think about that, Rex, and think the universe is even more vast than what we can see with our telescopes, because it's vast in other dimensions, like infinities. Yet all the infinities of all the universes and all the times and all the different forms of the universe still exist as a thing, as an artifact, all the way from the beginning to the end. And maybe time bends back around and recycles. It's almost got to at some point, in some way, because it all has to exist. It's got to be a thing. That's why I like to pick up something like a funnel or a cup. The entire universe, as mind-boggling as it is, beyond our ability to comprehend it, even in one dimension. But there's many dimensions. There are many multiverses, apparently, it seems. And it's at some level, way on the outside, it's an artifact. It's a great place there. Now, the thing is, I've showed you one way to find God on the tachyon scale. I said over here, you find God, because every pattern that could exist does exist. Another way is, as civilizations progress in time, our technical civilization is only a few thousand years old, from the Stone Age, right? So imagine if you got millions of years, you're type 1 civilization, a type 2 civilization, you harness the star, a type 3 civilization, you harness the galaxy, type 4 and beyond, you're in other dimensions. How long does it take to get there? Probably not really that long in technological development. And that may be why they're here in part 2. But if you,
No, go ahead. I'll talk after you finish.
So, that may be in part why they're here. And I want to talk a little bit more about why I think they're here. But what that says is that if you've got enough time going forward, a civilization could be like an entire galaxy could be one mind in essence and beyond. I even think, here's what I think. I think that time and space is kind of like, if you take a derivative of something that's three-dimensional, you get two-dimensional. We take the derivative of something that's two-dimensional, you get the first one-dimensional thing. You take the derivative of that, you get zero dimension, right? And when you integrate, you add dimensions. So the calculus is a dimensional transmission. And calculus is related to the limits, by the way. I was showing summations and things like that. So what I think is that there's a subspace that is it's the frequency of our universe. And it's probably what manifests things, that it manifests on the screen. There's that spooky action at a distance, how two particles are intertwined, no matter how far apart, they instantly, what you do to one affects the other, and it defies the speed of light, which blew Einstein's mind. Einstein said, how can that happen? But it's been measured, it's been confirmed. So if the whole universe is a holographic thing, it might be, it's like a 2D dimensional holographic film where you've got various interplays of frequencies of the electric space. I would submit is an electric dipole, much like water. The electrical dipole, again, It's like in a dielectric in a capacitor where you got a positive and negative, and something's vibrating. So the water molecule has the same thing. The water, because of the way the hydrogen atoms attached to it, they get more off to one side, and so one side's positive and the other side is negative. That's why a microwave interacts with a water molecule. That's why I'm not worried about O2, is because O2 is not asymmetrical like that. It's not an electrical dipole. So the thing is that in the Bible, it talks about the waters above, and some people interpret that as actual H2O. But free space actually does have that dielectric property to it, or light couldn't propagate through it. So you could look at space, even though that's to the material world seems to be a vacuum full of a lot of other stuff, but the energy of it is an electrical dipole type arrangement that suggests to you that it is much like water. It acts like water. From the electrical standpoint. So this idea of the waters below and the waters above is not alien to an electrical type guy such as myself. Now, if you take that as a screen, just think of that as a screen between the electrical and the magnetic properties of space. And if you're projecting upon that from a single point with a subspace field, then you get what looks like to us a 3D rendition, just like a hologram. And that could explain spooky action of distance. Now, I'm not a theoretical, I'm not a quantum mechanic physics. I lost my quantum socket wrench some time back, but I contemplate these things and I think about them. I have all my life because I've been trying to answer all these conundrums. And one of the key conundrums, again, is why are we as spiritual beings living in a physical universe? And I would say that once you've gone through this whole thing, or once you've mapped out every pattern, once you know all there is to know about everything there is to know, and you know all of this for billions and billions of years, you're going to be billions and billions of tons bored out of your skull. You would create a seemingly infinite play set, fracture your consciousness, and go in and experience.
Dude, that's deep. That's deep. And let me add to that. So let me show you something here. I'm going to do a screen share. This is a light bulb. And the light bulb gets electricity and then it activates. And my theory is the sun, our star that is lighting up the morning sky, the beautiful soul of the solar system, is connected to an electrical current that activates it. And the ancients talked about Saturn, and they talked about these different planets as the gods and the battles in the heavens. And there is enough evidence, and definitely when you look at ancient mythology. So let's take this. Let me go one place, and then I'm going to show you the whiteboard that I've got behind me here, that I'm connecting mythology to the planets and the stars and the constellations and Saturn being a star, etc. If you are a civilization that knows these parameters of physics that we don't quite yet understand, like the star and the sun and these Birkeland currents, and if you look at the clustering of galaxies and planets and stars, they seem to correlate with these Birkeland currents that are very much like filaments of the universe. And if you look at the brain and these neurons and these synapses and the way that they're created and they connect, and if you have a thought, you create, and these sparks of light and intelligence, it's almost like a microcosm of the macrocosm. And you brought up the holographic universe hypothesis and this giant hologram that we might be in. Well, now I think of reflections of light. So you've got the entire hologram, and the reflection of light will actually give you that perception of what is in front of you, the view, what you're looking at, what you're experiencing, these different shades of light, and moving the holographic film. But if you are a civilization that knows about these currents and you want to harness the energy of a star, would it make sense to create something of such magnitude, such huge proportions, that it's going to have to be larger than the sun to cover the sun, and then the distance you would have to be, and the heat that it would have to be able to withstand? Or you figure out a way to plug that light bulb. You figure out a way to tap into that current, right? So as that electricity is getting ready to hit that light bulb or that star, boom, you're tapping the energy, and you create this system that, like the rings of Saturn, that are harnessing that energy and then shooting it out. And then in doing so, they could also use that energy, kind of like you were talking about a minute ago, the universe. What did you say? You said something that made me think about these solar cells, where you've got these, like maybe Oumuamua was this solar cell, this ancient drone, or maybe a newer one that was tapping into the sun, and with this cell using this current, this electrical energy, this cosmic energy. So they could, instead of having to create something that would cover the entire star, they figured out a way to tap it at the core, maybe even at a different dimensional level, and that would be the cube. That's the cube, dude. That's the cube of Saturn right there. That's the current. They've tapped it, they've harnessed it, and these rings are reflecting this energy. And you've asked about the physical consciousness, like why are we in this physical experience? Well, maybe that's a part of this physical experience in the solar system, combined with our moon and the 28-day cycle and matter, and like a reincarnation, a way to tap the soul and launch it back into this body. And while we're building these empires for this like intergalactic species, they're using us as tools. They're using us as drones, as robots. And some of us have free will and some of us have less of it. But this right here is how they're doing it, man. They're plugging it, the rings of Saturn, instead of having to build something that covers the whole thing, just do these nice rings, man. You don't need as much energy. It's not as big. It's more effective. It's so many different levels I see here. And oh yeah, this is what I want to show you. Now I want to show you. Here we go. This is based upon right here. I don't know how well you can see this.
I can't see it. I can't see it.
I've been wanting to show this for a long time. Let's see here.
That green ink is kind of hard to see there, Rex.
Okay.
Green on white don't show up too good. Right.
Well, look, this is what we'll do. We'll figure it out here, because this is pretty important. I really want to share this with everybody. So when we look at the Anunnaki, and if the Anunnaki are if you look at what we read now as the Anunnaki, as the planets and the stars, Uranus is Anu, the father of the Anunnaki. Uranus has rings around it. Uranus is on its side, and Uranus was the original star. Something happened to Uranus. So I think that these rings somehow, this Birkeland current, they tapped into it, and these rings have taken the power of the star. Now, then you've got the father, the son and husband. Why did I put that? Gaia. That's Earth. Oh, Earth connected to the Anunnaki is anyway. Okay, so Kronos is Saturn. Kronos is the Golden Age. Ishtar is Inanna, which is Venus. And these were like at one point, many historians believe Saturn was our star. You had Venus, you had Earth, you had Mars, and then Venus takes off. Something happens to Saturn. The orbits change. Venus is referred to even as Lucifer sometimes, and there's a lot of mythology that links Lucifer and Inanna to creating great chaos, but also great beauty. Jupiter is Zeus. Jupiter is the king of the gods. Jupiter at one point, I believe, was a star. So do some people that follow the electric universe theory. So if Jupiter was a star, Saturn was a star, mythology talks about how Kronos kept eating his children. And then there was going to be a problem eventually, because Jupiter is Saturn's son. Jupiter is the son of Kronos. Jupiter turns into a star, takes the power from Kronos. That's the battle. So now Jupiter is a star, the king of the gods. Zeus means the king of the gods. And then now we've got Jesus as the king of the gods, as the only way through the Father is through me. Jesus is connected to our new star, the sun. Jesus meaning the new Zeus, the new king, or the Hail Zeus, Hail the King, and then sun is Utu in ancient Sumerian mythology. Before Utu, the sun god was Shema. Shema, I believe, is Saturn. Shamash is the ancient Anunnaki god of the sun. But scholars say Shamash and Utu are the same. I think they're completely separate. I think Utu is representing Jesus, the new sun, and the ancient star was Saturn, and before Saturn was Uranus. So if that's being said, I mean, coming from your education and knowledge base and information on stars and planets and mass and what you need for it to be a star, this would change pretty much everything. It would probably be very difficult for you to agree with me on this, but if you study and research ancient mythology and you connect it with the planets and the stars and the constellations, I think there's a very good chance Uranus was the original star in the solar system. Something caused it to get tilted on its side. Something caused the rings to happen. And then we have Saturn. Then we have Jupiter. And now we've got solar system. And then this right here, I was talking about the Birkeland currents. Here's the cube that's in the center of Saturn. And there's a lot of worship in the cube. The Jewish belief system, very powerful, very amazing beliefs. Well, they have a specific box that they'll wear on their head. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I can't remember. The Tefillin. And the Tefillin has a prayer written in it to Shema. Look at the connection of Shema and Shamash. And then also they worship typically late Friday night to Saturday, right? Saturday is Saturn Day. Friday is Ishtar Day, which is governed by Venus. So the Tefillin reminds me just of the cube of Saturn, man. So that's how I got this theory. So I think there's this Birkeland current. There's this huge current, and it started with Uranus, then it went to Saturn, then it went to Jupiter, and now Sol. And then also the battle of Enki and Enlil, I connected to the two strands of DNA. So you can see you got these different strands, these battling factions that are within all of us, man. It's not just outside of us, it's within us, because they're within us as well. Aphrodite is Venus, and I also believe Medusa was Venus. When Venus ejected from this like orbit, it takes off, and then people in the heavens, they're looking at these, like, you know, what looks like Medusa. They're seeing these huge plasma things go, and the petroglyphs that we see around the world, I think are duplicated with the Parod instability stuff, where they use these plasma experiments to duplicate these petroglyphs. Madame Blavatsky talked about the moon-colored people and the original 7 root races. The 7 root races, well, one of those original root races was the moon-colored people, which I wouldn't be surprised if that's something similar to the Greys.
Wow.
So what else do I have here? What else do I want? Mercury is Hermes Trismegistus, which is closest to the sun, which is knowledge. And Thoth is one of the oldest, if not the oldest gods, the oldest god that we know about, going back to Atlantis. Sin is our moon, is Luna. So when people say sin, oh, forgive me for my sin, that's another thing that I thought of today. A lot of people that are Christian, which is a solar-based religion, if you look at it astrotheologically with Jesus being connected to the sun, forgive me of my sins. Well, the ancient god of the moon is named Sin. So what's the, wow, what are we're saying words, we don't even know what we're saying. And we're looking at, now you got to start looking at the root of letters, and then you got to get into the Kabbalah, because each letter has a specific frequency which has power. People say, oh, don't cast spells, that's evil. Well, every time you spell something, you're casting a spell. We live in a trip, man.
Okay, so let's think about this. As you speak, as you think, your thoughts create the reality you go down. So you're actually, through the power of intention, playing down the dimension in the multiverse that I was talking about. So that's how you get where you wind up. Now I've got my Odin farmer's hat on. And by the way, Odin was the god of farming and the god of poetry. You know, in the old Odinic, Nordic, old Germanic poetry really likes alliteration, like green Greggs. Now, all that said, as you not know that the Nordic gods were the mortal gods. They were like human type gods, very human in nature. And in their world, they had 9 worlds, and they were all connected by the world tree. Now, you may think of the world tree as your Birkeland current. It is the current of knowledge. And the primary thing that Odin sought was knowledge and wisdom. And he went through great sacrifices to get knowledge and wisdom, including sacrificing himself unto himself on the world tree for 9 days and 9 nights. He actually spared himself with Gungnir. Some say that Odin paved the way for Christianity, and because Jesus was also crucified on a tree and speared through the heart, as Odin had been in the older lore. So, some people may not realize there may be some connection between Christianity and the Odinic thought forms. Now, all that said,
of course there is. Absolutely.
Exactly. And that's why I alluded. So I'm not saying there's nothing to this, but I'm gonna have to put on my NASA hat in a little bit. So this idea of a Birkeland currents, the idea of 9 worlds, which maybe the sun is one of the 9 worlds. Pluto obviously isn't, as Pluto is a ginormous Kuiper belt object, which we might call a big comet, which happens not to come close enough to the sun to get too activated, but it does get close enough to get an atmosphere. It just doesn't form. If you brought Pluto inside the inner solar system, you would get a ginormous tail spouting off of it, just like you would another comet. And it would be a sight to see because it is so large. And
people believe Venus was at that point at one point.
Yeah, Velikovsky thought so. Now,
with that said, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say Velikovsky's thinking Venus happened 3,500 years ago. And actually, I've read an ancient Sumerian tablet, Gregg, that takes it back 28,500 years ago. If we were to link it to a city, a dynasty that was talked about on the Sumerian king list approximately 28,500 years ago.
All right, now I'm going to put on my Apollo anniversary hat.
Oh, no. Now you got your real thinking cap on. Okay.
So let's talk about it from the standpoint of just physics as they're conventionally understood. In conventional physics, a star has fusion. And the fusion, now this doesn't agree with the electrical model of the universe, but the star becomes a star by its mass. It has enough mass that it can compress the atoms in it to the point that they will fuse. There's so much heat and pressure in there that atoms of helium, of hydrogen fuse to helium, and later as it gets really big and hot, helium fuses to carbon, and you start stepping up the chain until it gets so hot and it gets near fuel depletion and the thing explodes. It is supernova, and the explosion creates other heavier elements. That's the conventional science. Now, as you look out in the universe, you will find that you have an array of bodies of different size and mass. You have bodies, planetary bodies, a lot larger than Jupiter, and then you have something called brown dwarfs. They're kind of like a cross between a planet and a star. You just don't have enough mass to ignite. And as you go further up the scale, you find more and more massive objects. The supermassive stars burn out like blue giants. They burn out like 10,000 years and explode and create a lot of heavier elements. So and we see stars explode, and we see various masses, and what you see with astronomy fits that kind of model. Now, the thing that gets me about the notion that all these other planets were stars at one time is this. Earth is in the Goldilocks zone of going around our sun. In the Goldilocks zone, I can have Earth here. I'll use this cup as a snow cup I had back when I worked in the space station Freedom days. We'll say this is the sun. And Earth is going around and around the sun right now. It's in the Goldilocks zone. The Goldilocks zone means if it was any closer, it would be too hot, and our atmosphere, the oceans would boil, and would look like Venus for now. Or everything would burn off and would become a rock, basically, if it got too hot. Kind of like Mercury. If the Earth was further away from the sun, it would be too cold. Everything would freeze, and we'd be like Mars or worse. Mars is, almost in the habitable zone actually, but what the Goldilocks zone? It's just on the outside edge of it, kind of sort of. I mean, you could terraform Mars. Problem is that the sun, because Mars don't have a magnetic field, will strip away the atmosphere again eventually if you created another atmosphere. So unless you find a way to create a magnetic field on Mars, you're going to lose that atmosphere if you terraform it. So I'm not sure terraforming is a great and wonderful idea for Mars. I did a video with you about habitats on Mars. And I should take you to Mars on one of my, we should do a video and go to Mars together. I can do that. I can take you to I can take you to Mars, to my habitat on Mars, Rex. We haven't done it. We've talked about it. Now, so how do you go from all these other planets out there having been the star, and Earth happened to be in the Goldilocks zone of each one of these stars, and then when it switched and became a star in another place, Earth jumped, but just magically always jumps to the habitable zone? Rex, that's, for one thing, that's hard to swallow, but for the other thing, if you're jumping a planet around in orbits like that, that means Earth would have had to do some ginormous jumping. I think it would have shattered everything on the surface of Earth. I don't know how anything would survive a jump like that. So it kind of defies my level of understanding as to how, one, you get all these jumps and all these ping pong movement around of all the billiard balls and the planets, and how life survives all of that going forward each time. I mean, that would be cataclysm worse than what is suggested in that Chan book that you referred to.
Chan Thomas, yeah.
Yeah, where you talk about just Earth just stopping its rotation. That would be a horrendous cataclysm if the Earth just stopped its rotation. If you're actually, bing, sending Earth through the solar system like a ball on a tennis court, holy smoke, Rex. That would make the Chan Thomas thing look like a Sunday morning picnic. I have a hard time seeing how you could play billiard balls with all the planets continuously and still maintain life on a planet such as Earth. So that's just hard for me to swallow from the standpoint of planetary physics and about what we know about planets. Now, there may be some other, I'm not discounting what you're saying, there may be some other meaning to that as to what these planets might have been in the realm of some other being, some other governance, power structures that might have existed in previous times, what might have been thought to be the center of power, if there were other civilizations here. See, the interesting thing, Rex, is that we see odd signs that look like there's radiation on Mars. And to some, it looks as if some ginormous nuclear events occurred on the planet. Like it was not just a hit by asteroids, it's some radiological event happening, as if there was a great war there. And we know there are some who think that there are pyramids and other structures on Mars. There's also those that dispute and debate that. But Mars is an interesting planet. Who's your friend that's got the Foresight Institute that we've talked about before? What's his name? I'll think. Courtney Brown. Courtney Brown, he's done these remote viewing sessions, or had them done, in which they've seemed to have tapped into an ancient war in heavens. That was the topic of one of his remote viewing sessions. So maybe there was a war way back in the distant past, that Mars might have been a very principal planet in our solar system, and maybe it got the heck knocked out of it. So there may have been other civilizations through time that have waned and waxed, and it may have been greater. We may have had influences from other civilizations outside of our world, such as Anunnaki. And then again, Anunnaki just might have been Viking ancestors. They always did refer to the locals as the dark-haired people. So, and it could be that Nibiru was Norway. So it's hard to know through the sands of time what all these things are. But it's a case that it is an interesting puzzle, that the ancients of the Nordic faith believed in 9 worlds when you could interpret their 9 worlds. Of course, the Sumerians saw 12 worlds, so it depends on what you count and how you count it, right? So there's a whole lot of interesting things here. The fact that there is that pedigree of faiths that talk about all these worlds been in charge, and we know from the Roman mythology or religion, whatever you want to call it, that they believed that Cronus was the father god, and he was eating his kids. And Zeus was the one that stopped it. He's the one that beat Cronus and took over basically. So so you get the younger generations of pantheon as a transition. It's interesting though, and I don't think Anu and Neil necessarily were opposed to each other. But if you go into the Nordic philosophy, the father god is the All-Father, Odin, and his kids get along just fine, Thor and such. So there is some differences in the theologies on how the parent gods and the children gods relate to each other. But then again, I'm going to point out once again that the Germanic traditions, the Nordic traditions, have gods that are more of the mortal spectrum. They're more human in many respects. Although, so are the Anunnaki. They're very human. If you read, they write stuff in first person, and they write as if they have human emotions and feelings and desires, very much that. So what happened? Why did we go from those kind of gods that seem to be more human to greys, things that seem to be the cockroaches, the insects, the mantids, that apparently don't feel like us people, that have a different, Cliff High says they don't have the vagus nerve. Maybe he's correct, but they seem to proceed from a different biology, and it may be an insect biology. A hive mind might be their first natural inclination, as in our insect world. They live in hives. So that may come back to, why are they here? Rex, do you mind if I share a video here? I'm not going to play it. I just want to show it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And while you're pulling that up too, I was gonna say one other thing that I'd like to share with people is if you read through some of the, thanks. Yeah, I just real quick, I wanted to show this. So if you read through the ancient Sumerian tablets, it talks about Dumazid and Inanna and their love for each other, but they also had their opportunities as well, right? I guess they were married for an eternity, so they had their options, and they had their problems like everybody else. But what was fascinating is if you read about Dumazid and Inanna, and if you connect Inanna to this is just what I came up with. Isis is right. So Isis is. As if I am, I think, therefore I am. It just is. I think that's very powerful. If you connect Isis with Virgo, and some people connect Isis with the wife of God, I've also heard the Queen of Heaven, and Venus and the sun seem to be in these ancient mythologies talked about as counterparts. So when you talk about these stories in mythology, oftentimes what I'm seeing now is, and I certainly believe there are gods and goddesses and angels that walk among us that are far superior to what we can comprehend right now in these experiences. But I also see this information as being what our ancestors were writing down, and they were putting their twist on it, right? They're putting their humanistic ideas on.
Yeah,
they're watching it.
Yeah, you have to see it through your filter, through your eyes.
And the sun is heat, right? So I'm thinking the sun is positive and the moon is negative. So they're positive, negative. And also Isis, ice is queen. I'm thinking of the ice queen, which would be the opposite to the king of fire, like the fire king, just like, once again, it's the positive, the negative, the yin, the yang. So I just wanted to add that. And
so I couldn't help it, Rex. When you put out is, I was going to say, it all depends on what the definition of is. Just remember, I did not have sex with that woman. It was my cigar. Hey, Rex, I can't help it sometimes. You got to have a little fun.
Right? Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention, please? Oh, man. Oh, man.
Have a little fun.
It's a cigar, man. That's all it was.
We're talking about aliens invading and wiping out an entire planet and totally eliminate us. We're talking about cigars. That's keeping the humanity. And maybe that's what they fear. Because, let me do my share now. I've done some videos in the past on my channel that I think really talk to this in some degree. Let's see here. I think this is one that come up. Where's it at? That's not it. There we go. One of the videos that I did back in June of last year was a nuke in every pot. And in this video, I'm going to stop the share for a moment. I'm going to come back to share. In this video, I was talking about my experience with the HALO program, wherein over 20 years ago, I was developing technology in a garage, a couple of garages, to be able to hit space. We were doing something that used to take a superpower to accomplish. And it dawned on me that with the proliferation of technology was stupendous, that it wouldn't be very long at all until the powers of mass destruction would be in the hands and fingers of small groups, just like we were a small group doing what it took superpowers to do just a couple of decades earlier. It wouldn't be but a couple of decades later that you would have superpower technologies and weapon systems, weapons of mass destruction type capabilities. And at some point, if we didn't learn to get along, we would be our own biggest, greatest threat. I was concerned, Rex, that what would happen to us as we develop these technologies? How could we learn to get along? And I think that's a key thing, is learning to get along. I think the governments pit us against each other, so maybe we need to change our relationship with the governments that we have in this world so that we're not so ordered and divided. And I think they play division on us in order to enable them to rule us and with a harder hand. But I've also done another video called, and that may be why they're coming for us, because Rex, I'm afraid that they may be afraid of us. We are free-spirited people. We think for ourselves to some degree. We may be considered to be the cosmic loose cannon on the set in the universe. And if you're a species that is entirely hive, they may think, one, that their existence would gross us out, and two, that they are the anathema to who we are. But just the fact that we are maybe unpredictable, that we might do something, that we have emotions, that we are dangerous with the kind of technologies that we will acquire in the not so distant future, that danger scares them and they want to contain us. Now, I would say that from a global scale, the powers that be that rule this world may have the same thinking in mind, in that, hey, they played games on us for centuries and suddenly we're waking up to it. And the best way to control us is to cut down our numbers, hence the Georgia Guidestone, so we're more controllable, and then to use technology to control us, to put us in the hive. So I think the game is to put humanity into the hive. I tell people on my Green Gregs channel that the proposition of my channel is to help people survive, thrive, and stay out of the hive. That is my central thing that I tell people. And I even done a couple of videos about the hive. Let me share again, just so that people can find those. Now, what people need to know about a YouTube channel is that the playlists fill up very fast. If you really want to see everything that's on a channel, you go into the upper left-hand corner where it says videos, and you click videos, and you scroll down to see all the videos that's on that channel. And that way you can get and you'll see a lot more videos than you would, I just scroll too far down then. You see a lot more videos than you would if you were just looking at the playlists that are available when you pull that channel up. Now, one video I like for people to find is the human hive soon to arrive. And I introduced a term there I call the hive tech arms race, how the hive technology is rapidly developing in our society. And oh, by the way, to insulate my cell phone from the hive and prevent phone calls, I'm using this beautiful little product that I got from Rex here, a 5G pouch to hide my phone in that puts a Faraday cage around my phone so that it will not communicate with the world.
Yeah, you won't get a call when your phone's in that thing.
No. And so it keeps my phone from ringing and disturbing our call. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. But this thing right here is a step closer to being in the hive, because not only does it have a chip that enables it to talk with us, but it's got a GPS locator. And not only does it have the GPS, but it communicates back to the cell phone towers So they know where you're at as you go around with this device on you. It's almost like having a chip in your body, but you're carrying it around with you voluntarily. So, and also the software they have out there, they track and record and remember everything you've ever said or ever say on these things. So you're totally tracked. They know everywhere you go, everything you buy, everything you sell, and everything that you speak, they can be picked up by that speaker. They can even turn this thing on remotely and be listening to you and even taking video when you don't know it. And the person that proved that was Eric Snowden. And he is exiled out of the United States because he exposed what they do to us, how they monitor us, the depths of that. Another guy who is currently under arrest for telling us what's going on is Julian Assange. So we've got two people I think should be two of the biggest heroes in modern society who are both living either in exile or arrest states because they dared tell us what's happening. That's a scary thing. But why is this happening? It just so happens that it may be the agendas of those from outside who would fear us, especially from a hive mind world. And maybe that's the ultimate fate of any world or most worlds is to become hive mind to control its people and those here on this world. Now, it also is possible that those out there got to those down here and pre-integrated to them. Let me stop and share here. Oh, you know what? I'm going to share something else in a moment, but I'll stop. I won't do that for now. So what's to say that the powers that be in our world are not worshiping them? And maybe there was a war in space that, but prior to the Greys and insects, we had a more humanistic, human type intelligence coming to our solar system from other places. And maybe they lost that round. Maybe they conceded. Maybe they backed off. Maybe what's told to us in Revelations is their return. You've talked about yourself, a return of the gods. So what is it? Will they come back? How will they come back? Maybe some of them will come back in the sky. Maybe some of them are reincarnating amongst us. Maybe some, especially the gods that were more mortal and human, like the Nordic gods. Maybe they are incarnate, walking amongst us today. So here they be, perhaps getting ready for what's to come. And they're just now beginning to awake. So these are possibilities that fit within the realm of this live action role playing LARP session. Just food for thought. Rex and I are having fun, kicking around a lot of off the chart crazy ideas. But that said, it does make for an interesting thought concept here to kick around. So, but there's these enigmas that are still in this world. There's what are all these things people are seeing and experiencing? Why is it so hush hush, ha ha, swept under the rug? And swept under the rug by the powers that be. And it just so happens that they could have the very same agenda, just naturally by the way things are, but maybe they're working in concert. Maybe there's some of the agenda that seems to be apparent from the powers that be are really anti-humanity. And maybe they are under the direction and control by these other beings. And maybe they're not human. Human is having a heart. Human is having love. I would say that if you want to find God, look in your heart and find that love, that spark. The most beautiful thing in the universe is a human baby because it's so precious and so innocent and can so easily look into the universe. Everything it sees is a wonder to it. And it has the love. It has the needs. And we have to protect them. Humanity is like that in many ways. But we are, we're also capable of lashing out. Throwing a big temper tantrum. And now we're getting bigger and bigger toys to do it with. We've got to grow up enough to know how to be responsible and learn to get along. We've got to connect. This key, Rex, to humanity is our humanity. It is going back to that heart. What did they pierce in Jesus? His heart. But yet his heart survives, So, as Odin was also pierced on the world tree with Gungnir, his own spear, but he survives. So the thing is that through our hearts, through the love, we've got to reach out to each other. is love dispels hate. Our world is being filled with hate right now. If you were to take over this world, what better way to do it than to cause such division between the countries and division within the countries? You're finding that all over the world. Every country's got all kind of division within the country right now, but there's also divisions between the countries on the outside, and we're facing all these natural catastrophes. The world is going nuts. It's a madhouse. I'm going to do a video on that. It's a madhouse right now, internally and externally. And we're being divided. Hatred is being fanned. Hatred is not the answer. Hatred only leads to more hatred. You know, one person attacks another person because of hatred. Well, then they create hatred over there. It's how a feud, you know, in my part of the country, and, you know, a few hundred years ago, that was called feuds. And that's what you see between, you know, a lot of peoples and groups in the world too, is basically big, large feuds. Well, the truth is that there's good people on every side of everything. There's good people in every culture. There are good people in every race, creed, religion on earth. That doesn't mean that the organizations that pit them against each other are good, because organizations gain power by pitting people against each other, blaming things on the other people. And then they play people up and they get the support, and they grow by doing that. That is a very old power technique that's been used by leaders, so-called leaders, for all eternity. And it's an evil technique. We've got to learn how to get along as people, but relate directly to each other through our hearts. And I think the basic human government is actually a tribe. And the nation state is something of a pervert creation of control. We do need to have be able to cooperate with each other on a large scale, but we need to find good means to do that, where we're not played and where there's not the avenues to accumulate so much power in the hands of large corporations and organizations of all types, governmental and otherwise. I've said many times on my channel that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's stated by Lord Acton that birds of a feather flock together, and he who has a goal make the rule. When you combine these three together, these three principles, you wind up with tyranny. The only thing to stop the tyranny is having lots of checks and balances. Apparently, we don't have enough checks and balances in our society today. We've got to add to it, but they're trying to take
Maybe
them
we
away.
just don't have the right ones.
That could be. Now, in that venue, I'm actually doing something about it. I have started an organization called the Freedom Restoration Foundation. I don't know if you saw that. I put out a video on that. And we actually have people in Washington State, in Arizona, New York, Wisconsin, and Alabama. So we're going to be working to try to preserve, maintain, and restore freedoms that represent our rights that have been taken from us. So that is something we're doing. And for those that want to join in that, they can write to HAL5space at AOL.com and put freedom in the subject line of the email. And I've got a volunteer helping me with that, and we will get back to you. If you're interested in our survival tribes, which is another effort, you can email the same email, just put tribe in the subject line, and we will respond to that too. Let me write that address here. I'll put it on the screen. Just writing real quick here. That is the address right there. Hotel Alpha Lima 5, Sierra Papa Alpha Charlie Echo at Alpha October Lima Charlie October Mike.
You know that's an old email because AOL is like almost 8-track status. And oh my goodness, man, it took me months to get off the AOL dial-up. If you go back, 18, 20 years ago, and I remember canceling their service, and they kept calling me back trying to get me to stay. And I was like, this is worse than a timeshare. I don't want your dial-up, AOL.
That's why I'm using
AWOL.
That's why I'm using that email, so I don't use it for anything else now. That used to be my HAL5, Huntsville, Alabama, L5 Society email that I used. I've got a zillion other emails. Now, I have actually reserved And you know several of my other emails, by the way, but I've actually reserved a domain name for this organization. We will set up a website and have email according to that. I also have a Green Gregs email. I have a Power Grid Defense email, and I've got websites for all that. I've actually pulled my Green Gregs website down, but the email still works temporarily. I'll reestablish it when I get where I'm feeling comfortable about selling worms again nationwide. But so there's a lot to be said for why these guys may be after us. That don't mean we have to accept it. We can actually resist it. One way is to maintain our freedom, not give in to the hive, personally, on a personal level. Another thing is, well, hey, they're bugs, they're insects. If they're insectoids and if they have the chitin shell skins, soapy water will do them in. Just like
Take
snake
a
bugs.
bath.
See, now, this is
Soapy
where,
water.
when you combine a farmer, a rocket scientist, an electrical engineer, military guy, all together, what do you get? Somebody who figures out some unique ways to take on space aliens. You and I did a video. Let me share this. We actually talked about this in the previous video. I'll show this from my Galactic Gregs channel. So let's go here. Ding, ding, ding. Problem is the bam. This is Galactic Gregs. Now, the first videos I had on this channel, I took down because the lady that was in them was getting more attention than she wanted. We were talking about non-traditional propulsion techniques. She had started an organization to fund companies that want to build flying saucers, basically, or say breakthrough technology in propulsion. So if this is a video, you might recall, Rex, that we did together. You posted on your channel. I've got on mine. It's Alien Invasion or Clone Army is what I call it here. I forgot what you titled it. But I think that's what we're looking at. Is they're talking about hybrids, and I think what I call them when I texted you, Rex, I put had another name for that. Hybrids. Basically, they want to pull us in the hive. Hybrids. Oh yeah, by the way, this is several of the videos and a lot of rocket stuff, planet stuff. There's a space habitat I was talking to you about. So I cover a wide range of topics here on Galactic Gregs. So people may want to go in and subscribe to that. I'll stop to share. I've got a couple of things I might want to share, some of my rocket videos that I found that we might share, just to establish that I do have a background in rockets. But of course, Allison's laws of rockets are rockets go boom, rockets have always gone boom, and rockets always will go boom. So it may not be the best way to travel in space. Although I'm very excited that Elon Musk has found a way, it looks like, potentially, to close the case to actually use rocket technology to massively settle the planet Mars. Well, we'll have to see how that works out. And I wish him well and hope he can pull it off. But it still may not be the way to go. So, but why is the biggest billionaires in the world playing with rockets? You know, him and some of the biggest announced known billionaires, if there are other technology available. That's another enigma. So lots of enigmas, Rex. So maybe my little woo-woo-woo won't fly. One thing you will get is hard x-rays coming in if you got all those electrons moving around like that. So there will be challenges to making those kind of vehicles work, but it might be doable. It may not be quite what we've got at our fingertips at the moment. But, I put that out there just to answer, could they get here? And I would say, yeah, that's plausible that they could get here with a lot easier than we thought. But then again, as you said, maybe they've been here. They may have been here for a long time. The Fermi paradox would say they should have been here already, even traveling conventional means. But why are they hiding? Maybe they have an agenda. Maybe there's a war and the victors have another agenda to play on us, but they have to play by the rules of karma. So they got to get buy-in from the human species. So if there are overlords on our world who are thinking kind of sort of like them and they got to them, maybe they've got to buy in through that. And they're using that and the technologies of our world to create mass hypnosis upon us so that people follow along. So most people are in step with this, what's coming at us. They're just kind of walking into it. That's a scary proposition, but a lot of people seem to go along with it. But a lot of other people are waking up and saying, no, I don't want no part of it. And I think that we can survive, thrive, and stay out of the hive, and through our hearts and cooperation, not blow the world into a cinder ball, And I would submit, what is the future of being in the hive? Why would you want to be a worker ant if you're allowed to be? I mean, the only survivors in a world like that would be those who are absolute total tools to those in power. And, you know, there's a lot of allegations about the kind of things they've done to people right now going around. And, you know, the idea of these people being empowered with far power today through the use of these technologies is scary. I mean, once you get neural lace into your head, if they can hack and control that, then they've got direct access to your pleasure and pain centers. You got to realize that when rats have a electrode, just a simple, dumb electrical probe put into their brains and the pleasure and pain centers, you can cause a rat to starve to death by pressing the button that gives him the pleasure center. He won't even go for the button for food and water. They'll die. That's how powerful that is. But the pain center is just as powerful on the other way. So if they got a far more sophisticated system, or like implants in their neck, you're pointing to the jugular vein. What if they say, okay, we're tired of you, boom, or they just shut you down electrically from within? You know, if you have neural lace in your head, will they set up a communication system inside your brain where they're using infrared and other communication devices inside your brain to speed up your thought process? You might be able to work, you know, 1,000 times faster. It might be cool until the system shuts down and you realize that you don't have any natural neurological networks left. The synapses are rusty, and you just quit. When that system breaks down, you just shut down. You might be susceptible to the power grid outage at that point. He might not exist after a power grid outage. So being in the hive is not being alive. Being in the hive is not being human. But I suggested in my hive video, it's going to be like fly bait. At first, it's going to seem incredibly attractive. You might be able to think 1,000 times faster. You might be able to do a year's work in 2 hours. I mean, there's 2,080 work hours in a week, in a work year. You just take, 52 times 40, right? So if you can think 1,000 times faster, you can do a year's worth of work in 2 hours. So you might have to be competitive in the workplace. They might require you to have this. If you got it, the security is simple because they know who you are exactly instantly, and they don't have to worry about some fake or somebody stealing and appropriating an ID, your access to buildings. You won't need a computer console because everything can be projected on your visual cortex. You won't even need to type. I mean, you can just think everything. You're in direct contact with the computer. You get in the car, you don't need a speedometer or anything. You think to the car and you see what it sees. It's got its own sensors and they portray directly into your brain. You don't even need windows because you're looking through the cameras outside. It'd be great for spacecraft in some ways. If the technology were a technology that you had total control over, that would be awesome. You could perhaps even experience what it's like to be another human being, to feel what they feel. And that might be cool to the point, but that would be certainly a big thing in the triple X industry, if you know what I mean. But the temptations of that, what it could take. Imagine you could eat ice cream all day long in the virtual world and never gain an ounce. You could eat steak all day long in the virtual world and no animal's been slaughtered and you don't gain an ounce. You could smoke all day and never have lung cancer. Whatever you want to do, whatever's your fantasy, you could have it in spades in this virtual world that they may create for you with all these avatars. And you could have avatars that would do all kinds of stuff. So at first, it's going to be mind-boggling, mind-blowing, wow, until they get you in. Once you're reeled in, they got you. They don't have to give you all that stuff. That's an expensive proposition to put out there. Why would they maintain it when suddenly they reach the point they don't have to? Once you're totally in, and everybody's totally in, they can just shut it down. They can pick and choose who they want, what they want, because you've been sucked in, and it's game over. You're in a trap, and it's over, and you're no longer human. You no longer have feelings. You no longer have anything. You are a mind-numbed robot worker bee if you're permitted to exist. And you may not even have any conscious anything, because this stuff would be interfacing straight into your conscious, control your body stuff. They don't need your conscious mind anymore, unless they want it just for some entertainment on their side, some perverse, sick, twisted entertainment they might choose to use you for. When you consider, why would they give you anything more than that? They would no longer have a need to. And they could flip that switch before you know it, and you're nobody. You're nothing. So it might be easy to surrender this. It would be extremely tempting. It's going to be extremely exciting. That if they, and this could be an awesome technology if you really had control of it, absolute control that they couldn't get in. But no, we don't have that with the technology we have now. What, Rex? What do you think about all that?
So you bring up some great points, and let's finish it on this, because there needs to be balance. I think that all those technologies they sound fascinating and they sound amazing. And I would like some of those opportunities. I mean, it would be great if I could learn 10 languages in 10 minutes. However, I'm not willing to give up my sovereignty. I'm not willing to give up, quality of health. And it's nice to have some organic self here. With that being said, if there's wearables in the future, or if there's something that isn't going to make me reliant upon that, and think about certain people that get hooked on specific drugs, right? If this is going to cause the same response as specific drugs, then they could get hooked on it, and it could just be a whole other level of control. And I do see it being the future for many. I do see people getting stuck in virtual reality worlds within worlds. I even see in the future people are going to be used as storage centers for large conglomerates that need storage, because they're kind of running out of space right now. And you can put a lot more storage in human DNA than you can any silicon chips. And they've proved that multiple times throughout the years.
Hey, I shared with you where they're taking silkworm silk and putting memory on it. And they said that this can go in your cells. It would be no problem. Your cells could take this in. So it'd be another way to get memory into your systems. And I reminded you that sometime back, somebody figured a way to make spider milk by genetically modifying goats with goat milk. So it's really bizarre, Rex, what they might be planning on is how they might use us. And I am not opposed to technology. I like technology. I'm Galactic Gregs and Green Gregs. But I do want to maintain my sovereignty. I don't want to give them control. If I knew I could obtain more and more use of this without any way for them to get control, I'd be cool to it. The problem is they've got back doors into your computers. They monitor everything you do right now. So that's got to change. And maybe that's what we can work on with our future, with our Freedom Restoration Foundation, is we can work on bringing that back to us. And maybe we wouldn't be as scared of technology if the control was in our hands. But we just have to be very careful with that, Rex. Oh, by the way, if we are under invasion, there's other ways to bring them down. If they're in the hive mind, all their communications are linked, and they will have to communicate vastly with each other in long range and short range. And I would submit that they may use two forms of communication. They would use some RF system that would have a high baud rate, and it would probably be very similar to to 5G. So if you could shut down their comm by jamming it, they wouldn't be able to communicate. And if they're not individuals, they can't even think. They would, and if their minds are controlling their craft, as many people suggest, once you shut that down, they crash. They crash instantly because they can't control them. It
might be embedded in their DNA, is what I'm thinking. I think that their makeup, telepathic.
I'm going there, and we've been here before. That video I pointed out, I talked about both of these things. So you can hit them from the higher frequency to the long range RF side, which would be probably a very high frequency like 5G. And you can hit them also from actually UV, because if you look at the genetics, now that is a great point, because the Russians sometime back discovered there was light coming out of the genes, that a genetic spiral was like a waveguide. And the frequency that permits happens to be commensurate with the diameter of the genes themselves, that spiral, that helix, which happens to also be 2 angstroms, which happens to be the realm of UV light. So it may be that they have a telepathic communication that is basically at that frequency. If you turn that up too high, it would jam it. So here's how you take them down. You jam their inner craft communications, maybe with bright UV, but mainly with, maybe that's why they don't like daylight, but because they get overpowered by the UV. But you hit them with, and some of these craft were seemingly brought down with radar. So propulsion systems, as I mentioned earlier, there's certain frequencies that might be of interest. There may be some certain frequencies that would bring down the propulsion systems. bring down their comm system. That's bringing down their guidance. And so if you want one of those craft, just make it crash, and you got the craft, and you can do whatever you want to with it. And then if you encounter them directly, what you need is you need a big super soaker, high power pressure sprayer on your back full of soapy water, because chitin dissolves with soapy water. That's about the only way to kill the stink bugs, to spray the soapy water on it, because it dissolves their insect skin to the point that it stops up their breathing holes. And if you have a big UV light on your head, maybe a 5G transmitter, and you're walking around with a 5G transmitter and a UV light and soapy water, they just couldn't stand it. Now, if you think about a grayish skin, they reportedly feed through their skin. The UV light would hurt their skin, as would the soapy water. They would be scattering like cockroaches when you turn the light on. Oh, I'm talking about turning the light on. We're talking about cockroaches. Holy smoke, Rex, I think we're on to something.
Greg, we need to remind people, entertainment purposes only. This is a live action role-playing game, and we're talking about space bugs. So we're just talking about space bugs.
Cockroaches.
And soapy water. And Lee Wilbarger wants to wear a shirt that says, I love 5G. And I said, well, the only way I'm wearing a shirt that says I love 5G is if it blocks 5G. Halo, ladies and gentlemen, we have had an awesome conversation here today. Greg, show that off again. Hold on a second. There we go. Look at that liner.
There's a 5G liner in the metallic cap. So if I'm out
rainbows and like different color vortexes and different energy vortexes, I'm not even exaggerating, we're bouncing off your hat when you were like this. I was seeing entire light spectrums in different dimensions, and it was far out, man.
So Rex, we got to keep the aliens from getting their 5G liners.
Well, you know what? I love aliens, man, and space bugs. You know, not all space bugs are bad, so we just. You got to watch out for the space bugs that want to eat people. We love people more than space bugs, and we just
happily shake their tentacles as long as they're not trying to put a controller inside them. Hey, bud, how you doing?
I'm not gonna. You will not assimilate me, and I choose freedom. I choose independence, and I choose the right to think for myself. And I think that you have the right to think for yourself too, because you know what? This is just as much our journey as it is theirs, and sometimes people need reminded of that. And on that note, let's finish this on a super awesome, happy. Say something super awesome and happy, Greg. Come on, man. We need you, bro.
This is the super awesome, happy thing. We're here to experience the universe, to experience life and light and love. So that is the highest order thing we can do. That's the closest thing to God that we have, is the love that's within our hearts. And that's why we don't want to be subjected and to lose our souls, because that's
what they're afraid of.
Bingo. We have the ability to share the light, the love. And that's how we change the world. That's how we change humanity. Go up and give people a hug. Share the love, share the light. So that's how we make a difference. That's what we've got to do. Yeah. And Rex is sitting here with like explosions going out. So exactly. Share the love, share the light. We can change the world. So be the light you want to see. Be the light. Oh, by the way, light reflects and refracts through substances according to Snell's laws. And Snell's laws use the terms epsilon naught, mu naught. So if you go back and study light propagation through materials, you're going to find all kind of little funny things. And if you start relating them to the universe, they do. They all relate. It's just they react differently through different mediums, including the speed of light is actually different in different mediums. So epsilon naught and mu naught are huge. And they're also connected in some way to the inertia frame we're in. So, but you know what? It goes beyond matter. It's our love, our souls, our spirits. Our spirit is outside this material. And that's how we all connect. Our love, our hearts, knows no bounds of time or space. And that's why we really need to turn on the love frequency and turn it up high.
That's right. Turn it up. Be the light. Emit the light you want to see. Gregg, Allison, thank you very much. And I'm going to leave the links to your YouTube channels in the video description box. And man, we'll talk again soon.
Amen, brother. Love it. Take care.
You too. The legend, Gregg Allison. He also builds rockets
Amen.
and knows how to soap up aliens. Halo!
Hey, hello.